So, I mean, Carmine, the most famous book about presentation was written back in the early 20th century by Dale Carnegie, The Art of Public Speaking. And Carnegie nailed it. Like, no doubt about it. He did a really good job. Those principles stand up today. But modern technology and the passage of time gives us some deeper insights and some new tools. What are some of the most groundbreaking scientific discoveries about effective communication that weren't available 100 years ago in Carnegie's era?
Well, interestingly, Dale Carnegie's work, like you said, still stands up today, but I think it's more important today than ever. I think we should revisit it. You just gave me a great idea for a topic, article, and a video, so I'm going to keep that. We should revisit Carnegie's work, seriously, because they're rapport-building networking skills that certainly PR people absolutely need, and that have kind of gone by the wayside. I've certainly noticed it in the last few years. One of which, you might remember this, Doug, is make people feel as if they're the most important person in the room.
I love that.
Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
What you might know the dates.
15, I think, was the book, right?
Yeah. Like, he understood that at that time before these started getting in the way.
Yeah, phones.
And now we don't do that anymore. I have noticed that in so many organizations. People are distracted. They're looking at their phones. They're having a conversation. If you want to be a real leader and stand out, make eye contact. Make that person feel like you have their undivided attention, that they are the most important person in the room. Thank you, Dale Carnegie, 1915.
So you do that during your presentation. You make eye contact and hold on to it for, there is no set 2 seconds or 3 seconds, but hold on to it for what feels comfortable for the person in the audience and yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's for a presentation, but I'm suggesting, how about one-on-one?
One-on-one, yeah.
Doug, isn't this rapport building 101? I feel like we're losing it. But that's
and technologically, I mean, now we can record ourselves, watch it or listen back to it. I've done a ton of that in my career. But deeper technology like functional magnetic resonance imaging, actually being able to scan the brain and explore what parts of the brain are experiencing increased oxygenated blood flow. In other words, what parts of the brain are working at certain times during certain parts of the presentation.
So what's interesting is that you asked, your original question was, what are some of the scientific advances that Carnegie did not have? And then once I heard the name Carnegie, well, I just had to go off on my favorite topic. So, but there are so many, actually, that Dale Carnegie did not have, although I think intuitively he understood things. I think he had a whole chapter on simplify. Now we know a little bit more about what that means, because through MRI studies, through biometric sensors. Have you ever seen those kind of labs where they put sensors on people's scalps and they're testing everything from brain activity to pulse reaction to sweat on their skin? Yeah, I'm sure you've either talked about it or you've seen those labs.
Seen some of that, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've talked to some of those neuroscientists. So when we talk about simplicity, what does that mean? Well, now we're learning a lot more. Again, things that Carnegie probably knew instinctively, but he didn't go into it. He certainly didn't know cognitive load. So cognitive load means that when you give people too much information at any one sitting, they're going to drop the whole thing. It's like adding weights. You can handle 1, 2, or 3 plates, and then all of a sudden, stack on 4 more 45s, and you're going to lose the whole thing. But what I've been doing for 2 decades now is I am obsessed with what exactly does that mean, though. Okay, cognitive load, too much information, fine. Now what? What am I going to do with that information? So there's one tactic in particular that I've certainly written about, and I want to reinforce it with our listeners today, because I think it's the one most important thing they could probably do right now in their very next email or very next presentation. And that's stick to the rule of 3. Obviously, I've known about the rule of 3 for a long time, for years. I started writing about it with Steve Jobs because he would often break things up into 3. But now that I look at the research, there's a reason for it. People can only remember about 3 to 5 things in working memory.
That's the hippocampus. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then they forget it unless it's repeated constantly. So this whole idea about repetition, Doug, is interesting, because if you can't repeat something, it's not going to transfer into long-term memory. So what I've learned in the last few years of talking to neuroscientists and reading the research is one of the reasons why people like to stick to 3 is because it's easy to remember and easy to repeat. So if someone leaves your presentation and they don't know the top 3 takeaways, they're not going to remember a thing.
Right.
It's really interesting. They've got to be able to repeat it. So a few months ago, I interviewed a guy who wrote a best-selling book on the brain and why it remembers the way it does. So it wasn't just about communication. He was a neuroscientist. I interviewed him, and he gave me a good tip, one that I've forgotten. Stick to 3. He brought that up. I didn't. He said 3 points. In a presentation, no more than 3 key messages. But make sure those messages are clear, not only at the beginning, but recap them at the end. I've been speaking for years, for decades. I don't always do that. In fact, I rarely do that. I'm pretty good at breaking things up into 3. Here's 3 things you need to know, or 3 things you can take away from this discussion. But I don't recap them at the end. He said that's crucial. If you don't recap them at the end, they're going to get lost in the middle. So it's very interesting, but I think through science and talking to neuroscientists, we can learn a lot more about how to be more effective communicators, even though we know some of it intuitively, and a lot of it we're learning on podcasts like yours. But then if you look at the science, it starts to all make sense.
Another key part of your book is you talk about having passion and energy for your topic, and neuroscience supports that too. For example, we have mirror neurons in our brain. If you're excited about something,
good point.
There are synaptic connections in my brain that get excited as well. Now, I might later determine what you were excited about was a bunch of crap, but for the moment, my brain is feeding off of your energy. How important is it for me as a PR person to get my CEO to be energetic about this thing they're talking about?
You flipped the question on me. Okay.
I did.
I thought you were going to say, how do we as speakers? Okay, I do have a tactic for that, because it's easy for us. You're right. It's easy for us to be excited and passionate about this topic. My goodness, I'm working on a new audio original podcast. I've been having to write scripts for it. So the last 3 weeks, I've been coming into this office here on the weekends, Saturday and Sundays, and looking forward to it. Like, I can't wait. Cool. Sunday morning, let's go.
Cool.
How many times in your life do you do that, especially in your career? So I think you're right. It's easy for us to reflect that passion. Okay. So a couple of things about how to teach someone else. First of all, I just learned this a couple of weeks ago by talking to a cognitive neuroscientist. Do you know why we need to focus on energy? Why that's more important than your first slide? Because the human brain is judging you, is evaluating you, is sizing you up in the first 20 seconds of seeing you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's because it is deep-seated evolutionary trait. Friend or foe?
Right.
Do I like this person or do I not like this person? And, your brain's going through all that. So when you first appear, have a smile on your face. Years ago, I've been, when you get the benefit of watching yourself on video, I see that, why am I not smiling in that keynote? Because I'm too focused on the next slide. Should I have swapped slide 4 and 3? It gets in your brain, you're thinking ahead, and you're not really focused on the present and putting a smile on your face and being happy to share your message. So that's one thing you can reinforce with people. And also ask them. I used to be in PR. I had a journalism career, then a short PR career, but about 4 or 5 years where I did a lot of media training, presentation coaching. And then I started writing books and building my own practice. So I definitely know the PR side. Here's a question they don't always ask the person they're preparing for the speech or the presentation. And that is, aside from the PowerPoint, aside from the data and the numbers, what is it about this year, this month, this presentation that you are especially excited about that maybe other people don't know or the audience doesn't appreciate? What would that be? So you have to help people dig a little deeper about their topic and why they're excited. Just kind of draw it out of them. But I don't think it does a lot of good to say, look more excited. How? Exactly. That's what I like to do. That's why I like to do the research and read books and break it down. What exactly do we mean by a certain topic?
Okay, let me do exactly that. From your book, the piece, and I do presentation coaching, media training over 20 some odd years myself. Saw your book on the shelf, had to buy it. Just Talk Like TED speaks to me. So it's a perfect book to buy. The buzz phrase right now is be authentic. And I always like to add that my best ad libs in this life are well rehearsed. And most people kind of scoff at me. You're not being authentic. You've practiced. But your book makes a different case. That practice will help strip away the fake layers of, I'll call it faux authenticity, that we all adopt in public. Expand on that a little bit for me if you could.
Well, you just articulated it better than I wrote it.
No, you wrote it really well.
No, I like that. I really do like that. Faux authenticity?
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I came up with that. I'd be using it all the time.
It's yours. You've inspired me. It's yours. Yeah.
Yeah. So practice. Look, no one. I've worked also with executives, and I've seen hundreds of speakers. Not one person I know has over practiced ever. So I'm sure there's a limit at where you practice so much, maybe you are too robotic, but I don't see it because most people, almost everyone, under practices by like a factor of 10.
Yeah.
And that's why they give a presentation and they are deer in the headlights because they haven't practiced in what's called real world conditions. So yes, you can be more authentic when you practice because you're more comfortable in the environment. You've been there before. When I give talks, I'll often ask, if they're business professionals, I'll often ask them, how many times have you recorded yourself on Zoom before the meeting? Like, how many times do you record yourself and then watch the video back?
Zero.
No one.
Zero.
No one.
Yes.
Yeah, almost zero. Well, that's practicing. That's what we mean by practice, folks. So don't get too confused about, well, I heard Doug say that if you practice, you'll be more confident, more authentic, but I disagree because it'll be too robotic. No, that's not what we mean at all. In fact, it's just the opposite. You're so comfortable because you've been there that it helps you unleash your real personality. So everything from the lights to record yourself on video. How does my background look? Am I looking in the, am I making eye contact with the camera? That's the eye of the listener in this case. Is it well lit? Do I sound good? Am I using too many ahs? Am I hesitating too much? Is it taking too much time to get to the point? And go through the presentation so that you're comfortable. Oh, this is what I'm going to say for slide number 5. And this is the story I'm going to add there. And this is the nugget I'm going to add there. And I'm out in 20 minutes and everyone's going to be happy. And then the next time when you're really on, you can put a smile on your face and just have fun. I think it makes a big difference. Can I give you a quick anecdote?
Yeah.
Since it just came to mind.
Yeah.
So I had to give a talk last year, a little intimidating, to MIT, at MIT. Okay. Well, it was, why? Hey, I'm good at what I do, but I don't think I could write for MIT or do the science stuff. And the whole day was AI stuff, right? It was all AI. The deepest thinkers in AI. They put me at the end. I'm like the closer. And the purpose of that is because, as Doug, you've talked about in your podcast, we all know you're going to have the greatest idea in the world. If you can't communicate it, no one is going to buy into it. So that's why they wanted me as the closer, someone who's going to take all of this information and say, great stuff, but if you can't remember it or you don't understand it, it's never going to go anywhere. And you are not the audience for it's stakeholders in other companies that need to understand all of this technical language that you just heard. So how do you translate it for your audiences? That was my part. So I started to feel comfortable that I knew what it was, why I was there. But secondly, Doug, I practiced that presentation a lot, at least 10 to 15 times all the way through, for two reasons. One, again, like I said, I was a little intimidated. I wanted to make sure I hit all the right points. But two, it was 20 minutes and out. Okay, and they have a countdown clock right in front of you in big red numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the pressure of, it's not 22 minutes, Carmine. You can't meander. So I had to practice that. And I knew this going in, thank goodness, no prompter, no notes, because it was a stage. There's no way you can put notes anywhere.
You were doing a TED.
Kind of like a TED Talk.
Yeah.
But again, it was one of those things where, yes, it was like a TED Talk, but it was also 20 minutes. I had that firm time limit like a TED Talk. So I better practice this because I can't even find a reference, a note where I want to go next. I better practice this too, so that I look and sound confident. So I knew exactly how I was going to start. I knew exactly how it was going to end. When I got there, the setting, the environment, it was a little off-putting. There was just so much going on, and yet I was able to focus. And all the craziness was going on backstage. I mean, they had a full production studio. They were miking me up. There were two people working on me on these cables. So many distractions. Anyone else, or maybe me at another time, would have gotten really nervous. The buildup. And then when I walked out, it was so dark, I couldn't see the audience. The lights were on me. I couldn't see anybody. I could barely see their eyes. So everything threw me off. But if I hadn't have practiced 15 times, I wouldn't have been able to start just exactly as I had practiced, with a smile on my face, and I was cool as could be, even though you can't see all the commotion going on in the background. So that's the value of practice. You can have fun in the moment and not be all caught up and nervous about things.
Yeah, amen. Totally agree. You've identified 9 key elements, 9 for successful TED Talks in your book. We don't have time for
3. Looking back on it, now that we know what the scientific studies are finding.
Well, I want to ask you which 3, and then with the philosophy of threes, and real quick, because we're getting tight on time, which 3 do you think listeners should take away as the most crucial if they're looking to improve their presentation skills? Practice is one we've already covered.
Yeah, real quickly. Passion. Passion is a requirement. It is not sufficient, but you do need to dig deep, like we just talked about, and ask yourself, what is it about this topic that they don't know, that my audience should know, and that I'm excited about? Asking yourself that question will change your presentation before you even create the first slide. Second, absolutely, storytelling. We don't really have to go into that because this is what the whole podcast is all about. But you better have some stories, personal stories about you, or anecdotes or experiences, and case studies too. All of the PR folks listening have case studies. They've got a ton of case studies. That's a story. You're storytelling through the case study. And third, use that story, use that case study to create memorable moments. And this is one thing that, since I wrote Talk Like That, I've learned even more about. Doug, you must know this because you've interviewed people on it. Your audience will forget. 90% of what you say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're not that interesting.
Yeah.
Hate to tell you. No matter how engaging you think you are, they remember about 10%. Spend most of your time creating those 10% moments that people are going to remember.
Nice. And how much of that is the thinking and how much of that is the feeling? In other words, do I want them to remember the thinks that I give them or the feels that I give them?
Feels. Yeah, no, absolutely. Feels, because if they feel something powerful, they're going to remember what you say. But feeling could be again, these are all the tactics that you've talked about. So go back and listen to the podcast. Novelty, unexpectedness, an intriguing question, a very interesting visual metaphor of how to look at a particular product. But what are those moments that people are going to remember? Don't spend 90% of your time on bullet point number 4 on slide 5. They're not going to remember that.
Excellent. It's great to meet you, and I love spending time with you today, Carmine.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.